The neon lights of New Terra colony cast strange shadows through the rain, reflecting off the metallic buildings in a dance of purple and blue. Thera pressed herself against the cold wall, her four iridescent eyes scanning the empty alley as she clutched her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, and here she was, searching through waste bins for anything edible. Her silvery skin, once luminescent with health, had dulled from weeks of malnutrition. The thought of her unborn child going hungry drove her to take risks she wouldn't normally consider. She'd already been chased away from 3 different food dispensaries today. Apparently, her kind wasn't welcome in the better parts of the colony. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Heavy boots on metal grating, security patrol. Thera's heart raced as she tried to merge deeper into the shadows, but her pregnancy made quick movement difficult. The footsteps stopped, and a beam of light cut through the darkness. Security. Show yourself, a deep voice commanded. The tone was firm but not hostile. Thera considered running but knew she couldn't move fast enough. Slowly, she stepped into the light, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly to adjust. The security officer was tall, even for a human, with broad shoulders and a stern face that softened slightly when he saw her condition. "I'm Officer Marcus Reed," he said, lowering his light but not his guard. "This area is restricted after curfew." I was just leaving," Thera whispered, her translator crackling with static. She took a step backward, but her legs wobbled from exhaustion. Marcus moved forward quickly as she stumbled, catching her arm before she could fall. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, her skin was ice cold. His training told him to escort her to the detention center for processing, but something in her desperate expression made him hesitate. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, noticing how she kept one arm protectively wrapped around her middle. Thera remained silent, but her stomach answered with an audible growl. Marcus sighed, reaching into his utility belt and pulling out an emergency ration bar. Her eyes widened at the sight of food, but she didn't grab for it immediately. "It's not poison," he said, holding it out. "It's standard issue. Not delicious, but nutritious." With trembling fingers, Thera accepted the bar. She took a small bite, then quickly devoured the rest as Marcus watched with growing concern. This wasn't just another refugee case, something about her spoke of sophistication, of education. What had driven someone like her to scavenge in the depths of the colony? "There's a shelter 3 levels up," he began, but she was already shaking her head. They don't take my kind there," she said softly. "Especially not in my condition." Marcus frowned. He'd heard rumors about discrimination at some shelters, but hadn't realized how bad it had gotten. He looked at his chronometer, then back at the alien woman who seemed to be fighting to stay on her feet. "I have an apartment nearby," he said finally. "Clean, warm, and I've got more food. No strings attached, just a meal and a chance to rest." Thera stared at him, all 4 eyes wide with surprise and suspicion. "Why would you help me?" Marcus holstered his light, his expression serious. "Because I'm starting to think this colony isn't as civilized as we pretend it is. And because no one should have to dig through trash for food, especially not someone carrying a child." For a long moment, Thera stood silent, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I'm Thera," she said quietly. "And, thank you." As Marcus led her through the back streets toward his apartment, neither of them realized that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Marcus's apartment was modest but warm, a stark contrast to the cold streets below. Thera sat awkwardly on his couch, her silvery hands wrapped around a steaming cup of nutrient broth. The rich aroma made her mouth water, but she forced herself to sip slowly, savoring each mouthful. Marcus moved around his kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing a more substantial meal. He kept glancing at his unusual guest, noting how she seemed to be fighting the urge to bolt. Her posture remained tense, ready for flight, even as exhaustion showed clearly in the dim glow of her skin. "You're from Lamaria, aren't you?" he asked, breaking the silence. I recognized the bioluminescence patterns. Thara's 4 eyes widened slightly. "You know of my world?" "I was stationed near the Lemurian system during the peace negotiations," Marcus replied, setting a plate of synthesized protein and vegetables before her. "Beautiful planet, but the political situation was complex." A bitter laugh escaped Thara's lips. "Complex is a diplomatic way of putting it." She stared down at the food, her expression darkening. "My people are dying, torn apart by those who would rather wage war than accept change." Marcus sat in the chair opposite her, his face serious. "Is that why you left?" Thara's hand moved protectively to her swollen belly. "I was a medical researcher," she said quietly. "I discovered something in our genetic structure, a mutation that could help us adapt to changing environments." "But the military council." She trailed off, her skin flickering with emotion. "They wanted to use it as a weapon," Marcus finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. She nodded. "They wanted to create soldiers, enhanced warriors to continue their pointless wars. When I refused." Her voice broke slightly. "When I refused, they decided to make me their first test subject." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And the child?" "A miracle," Thara whispered. "The experiments changed me, but not in the way they intended. Instead of becoming a weapon, I became stronger in other ways. And then I discovered I was carrying new life, something that shouldn't have been possible given the genetic modifications they forced on me." Marcus leaned forward, his training telling him to be cautious, but his instincts pushing him to help. "They're still looking for you, aren't they?" "Always," Thara confirmed, her voice tired. "I managed to steal aboard a transport ship, hide in cargo holds, work my way through 3 different space stations before reaching New Terra. I thought I'd finally found somewhere to disappear, but..." She gestured vaguely at herself. "I'm not exactly inconspicuous in my condition." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Finally, he stood, walking to his security terminal. "I'm going to help you," he said firmly, beginning to type. Thara stared at him in disbelief. "You can't. If they trace me here dash." "I have connections," Marcus interrupted. "People who owe me favors. We can get you proper documentation, medical care." He turned to face her. "But you have to trust me." "Trust doesn't come easily anymore," Thara admitted. Marcus's expression softened. "I know. But sometimes we have to take that risk, especially when we're protecting something precious." His eyes moved to her pregnant belly, then back to her face. "Let me help you, Thara. Not out of pity, but because it's the right thing to do." For a long moment, Thara sat in silence, studying the human who had so unexpectedly become her potential savior. Finally, she gave a small nod. "I don't have much choice, do I?" "There's always a choice," Marcus replied. "I'm just offering you a better one than searching through garbage for food." A tiny smile tugged at Thara's lips, the first genuine expression of joy he'd seen from her. "Then I accept your help, Marcus Reed. And I hope we both don't come to regret it." As Marcus returned to his terminal, Thara felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Perhaps here, in this unlikely sanctuary with this unexpected ally, she could finally stop running. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus first brought Thara home. The apartment had transformed subtly, medical supplements lined one shelf, a soft blanket draped over the couch where Thara spent her nights despite Marcus's repeated offers of the spare room. Her silvery skin had regained some of its natural luminescence, and her pregnancy was progressing well under the care of a discreet doctor Marcus knew. But peace never lasted long for fugitives. The warning came on a quiet evening as Marcus was reviewing security protocols on his data pad. A message from an old contact flashed across the screen: Lemurian vessels spotted in orbit. Military class. They're searching. Marcus's head snapped up to where Thera sat by the window, her hands resting on her growing belly as she watched the city lights. She must have sensed his tension because all four of her eyes turned to him questioningly. "They're here," he said simply, watching as the gentle glow of her skin dimmed with fear. "How long?" Her voice was steady despite her obvious distress. "Not long enough." Marcus was already moving, pulling out secure storage containers and beginning to pack essential supplies. "We need to move you somewhere safer." Thera stood shakily. "No, I should leave. I've already put you at too much risk." Marcus paused in his preparations to face her. "If you think I'm letting you disappear back into those streets, you don't know me very well." "Marcus," she started, but he cut her off. "The military council doesn't know about me. We can use that to our advantage." He pulled out his old military credentials, ones that still carried weight in certain circles. "I have a safe house in the lower industrial district. Off-grid, shielded from scans." A sudden pounding at the door made them both freeze. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "Security forces. Open up." Marcus moved silently, gesturing for Thera to head toward the bedroom. She slipped away as he approached the door, his posture relaxed but alert. "Officer Reed here," he called out, buying time as he heard Thera accessing the emergency exit he'd shown her days ago. "Just getting dressed." "One moment." The pounding came again, more insistent. "Immediate entry required. We have reports of unauthorized alien presence." Marcus opened the door, facing 3 armed officers and 2 figures in distinctive Lemurian military uniforms. Their silver-gray skin was marked with militant tattoos, their 4 eyes glowing with cold purpose. Commander Reed, one of the human officers, nodded respectfully. "We're conducting a sweep for a fugitive. Dangerous specimen, escaped from a military research facility." "Specimen?" Marcus kept his voice professional, disinterested. "I wasn't aware we had any active alerts." One of the Lemurians stepped forward, his skin pulsing with barely contained aggression. "This is a matter of planetary security. The fugitive carries classified genetic modifications. She must be contained." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "She?" "A female," the Lemurian confirmed. "Pregnant. The child she carries is property of the military council." Something cold settled in Marcus's chest, but his expression remained neutral. "I haven't seen any pregnant aliens in this sector, but I'll certainly report if I do. Would you like to check my apartment?" The human officers moved to enter, but the Lemurian held up a hand, his 4 eyes fixed intently on Marcus. "That won't be necessary. We have other sectors to search." His gaze lingered a moment longer. "Remember, Commander. Harboring such a fugitive would be considered an act against both our governments." "Understood," Marcus replied calmly. "Good hunting." The door closed, and Marcus waited, counting heartbeats until the footsteps faded. Then he moved swiftly to the bedroom, finding Thera emerging from the hidden panel in the wall. "You heard?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "My baby is not their property," she whispered fiercely. "No," Marcus agreed, his voice hard with determination. "It's not. And they're not going to get either of you." He quickly gathered the emergency supplies he'd prepared. "We need to move now, while they're searching other sectors." Thera caught his arm as he passed. "Why are you risking so much for us?" Marcus paused, looking down at her hand on his arm, her skin giving off a soft, worried glow. "Because some things are worth fighting for," he said simply. "And some people are worth protecting." The intensity in his eyes made her skin pulse with a different kind of light, but there was no time to dwell on what that might mean. They had to move, had to run, had to find a way to keep her child safe from those who would turn it into a weapon. As they slipped out into the night, using Marcus's knowledge of the security grid to avoid detection, Thera realized that for the first time in her flight, she wasn't running alone. The safe house was little more than a reinforced storage unit in an abandoned industrial complex, but it offered something precious: security. Marcus had converted it years ago, installing shielding technology and basic living amenities. As he sealed the heavy door behind them, Thera took in the sparse but practical space. The shielding will mask your biological signature, Marcus explained, activating various security systems. And the walls are thick enough to contain your natural bioluminescence. Thera sank onto a narrow cot, her hands trembling slightly. "They're not going to stop searching," she said quietly. "The military council, they're obsessed with the genetic modifications they forced on me. The fact that I can carry a child despite them." She placed her hands protectively over her belly. Marcus knelt before her, his expression intense. "Tell me everything about these modifications. What exactly were they trying to achieve?" Thera's skin pulsed with remembered fear. "They wanted to create the perfect soldier. Our people are naturally empathic, we can sense emotions through our bioluminescence. They wanted to weaponize that ability, turn it into something that could incapacitate enemies. But it didn't work the way they planned," Marcus prompted. "No." A small, fierce smile crossed Thera's face. "Instead of becoming a weapon, I gained the ability to heal. The modifications allowed me to adapt, to regenerate. And somehow..." She looked down at her swollen belly. "Somehow it made the impossible possible." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "That's why they want the child. They think it might have inherited these abilities. Or developed new ones," Thera whispered. "I can feel it, Marcus. The baby, it's special. Different. When I focus, I can sense its consciousness already forming, far more advanced than it should be at this stage." A sudden alert from Marcus's security system interrupted them. He moved swiftly to the monitors, his expression darkening. "They're sweeping the industrial sector," he reported. "Using advanced bioscanners. The shielding should hold, but we're trapped," Thera finished. Marcus shook his head. "No. We're buying time." He pulled out his data pad, fingers flying over the screen. "I still have contacts from my military days. People who owe me favors. People who would be very interested to learn about a government conducting illegal genetic experiments on its own citizens." Thera's eyes widened. "You're going to expose them?" "I'm going to give them a choice," Marcus corrected. "Either they back off, or their dirty secrets go public. Even the military council can't afford that kind of diplomatic scandal." A sharp pain suddenly made Thera gasp, her skin flaring bright with distress. Marcus was at her side instantly. "The baby," she managed through clenched teeth. "The stress, it's too much." Marcus's heart raced as he saw her pain. Without thinking, he took her hand. To his shock, where their skin touched, a soft glow began to spread. Thera's eyes widened in wonder. That's not possible," she whispered. "Humans can't connect to our bioluminescent network." But the evidence was undeniable. Through their joined hands, Marcus could feel a faint echo of her emotions: fear, hope, and something deeper, something that made his heart skip a beat. "The baby," Thera said softly. "It must be acting as a bridge, connecting us somehow." She placed their joined hands on her belly, and Marcus gasped as he felt a tiny consciousness brush against his mind, curious and unafraid. The moment was shattered by another alert. The search teams were getting closer. "We need to move," Marcus said reluctantly, pulling his hand away. "There's a transport waiting 2 levels down. If we can reach it." Thera stood, her face set with determination. "Then we'll reach it. Together." As they prepared to make their escape, Marcus found himself fighting an unexpected urge to pull her close, to protect her with more than just his professional skills. The connection they'd shared, however brief, had changed something between them. And he was starting to realize that keeping her safe had become more than just a mission, it had become a need as vital as breathing. The underground transport tunnel echoed with the sound of pursuit. Marcus and Thera moved as quickly as her condition allowed, his hand steady on her arm as he guided her through the darkness. The baby's distress was evident in the erratic pulses of Thera's bioluminescence, casting strange shadows on the metal walls. Just a little further, Marcus encouraged, checking his data pad. The transport was waiting ahead, piloted by one of his most trusted contacts. But between them and freedom stood a final obstacle. Two Lemurian soldiers materialized from a side passage, their military-enhanced eyes glowing with predatory intent. Behind them, heavy footsteps announced the arrival of human security forces. Specimen located, one of the Lemurians announced into his comm device. And her collaborator. Marcus stepped partially in front of Thera, his stance protective but his voice remained calm. You might want to check your urgent messages before doing anything hasty. The lead Lemurian's skin flickered with confusion as his device chimed. He read the message, his four eyes widening in shock. Impossible, he hissed. You wouldn't dare. Every detail of your illegal experimentation program, ready to be broadcast across 3 sectors, Marcus confirmed. Including documentation of how you violated not only Lemurian law but 6 different interstellar treaties. I wonder how the Federation Council would react? The second Lemurian moved forward aggressively, but his commander held up a hand. Wait. Sir, the specimen dash is no longer our concern. The commander's skin had taken on a sickly pallor. New orders from the council. Mission abandoned. Thera's grip on Marcus's arm tightened as she sensed the shift in the soldier's emotions, fury, frustration, and underlying fear. The human security forces looked confused but were already backing away, wanting no part in what was clearly becoming a diplomatic incident. The Lemurian commander fixed his 4 eyes on Thera. The council rescinds all claims on you and your offspring. You are free. The words seemed to pain him physically. And you'll never come near her again, Marcus added, his voice carrying a steel edge. Because if you do, every news outlet in the Federation gets the full story. Are we clear? The commander's skin flashed with barely suppressed rage, but he nodded stiffly. Within moments, the tunnel was empty except for Marcus and Thera. She sagged against him, relief making her legs weak. It's over? Just like that? Just like that, Marcus confirmed, but kept his weapon ready as he guided her toward the waiting transport. The military council cares more about their reputation than any single experiment. Even one as successful as you. They reached the transport, its doors sliding open to reveal a secure cabin. Once inside, Thera finally allowed herself to relax, her skin glowing with a soft, peaceful light. Where will we go? She asked quietly. Marcus's heart skipped at her use of we. I have a place in mind. A small colony on Meridian. Self-governed, advanced medical facilities, and a history of accepting refugees. It's where I was planning to retire, actually. Buy a house. Start a life away from all this. Thera's skin brightened with hope. It sounds perfect. She hesitated, then added softly, but why would you leave everything behind? For us? Marcus turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Where their skin touched, that same miraculous glow appeared, their connection strengthened by the consciousness growing within her. Because in trying to save you, I found something I never knew I was looking for, he said simply. A chance at a real family. If that's something you want too. Thera's answer came not in words but in the brilliant surge of her bioluminescence, filling the cabin with a light that spoke of joy, love, and promise. She drew his hand to her belly, where their unborn child's consciousness reached out to both of them, radiating pure acceptance. As the transport carried them toward their new life, Marcus marveled at how a simple act of kindness, helping a hungry stranger in an alley, had led him to a love that transcended species, a family that defied biology, and a future brighter than any he could have imagined. They had much to figure out, a home to build, a child to raise, a life to create together. But for now, in the gentle glow of Thera's happiness, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be.